Hi everyone, Krista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about FindAGrave. If you are not familiar with FindAGrave, you're in for a real treat. Lots of treasures to be found there. If you are familiar with FindAGrave, I'm hoping today you'll learn something new, some little new nuance of the site or something that you hadn't seen before or noticed that will just help you understand more about how to use the website to learn more about your own family history. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. We're just going to cover some basic 101 information about searching FindAGrave, either through Ancestry.com or directly through FindAGrave. In a couple of days, we'll talk a little bit more about the mobile app and how you can be a contributor to FindAGrave. But today we're just talking about utilizing the website as a consumer. Now, one of the things you need to know about FindAGrave is that it is free. It is a website that was created and put together and contributed to by volunteers entirely. 116 million tombstones have been, pages have been created to memorialize tombstones in cemeteries around the world. And all of that work has been done by volunteers. And so it is a free website. You do not need a subscription to access it. Now, you do need a username and password if you're going to contribute to the website, but again, no subscription is required. Now, a short time ago, Ancestry.com acquired FindAGrave. We host their servers and are working on a mobile app and some other tools and things to keep it up and running. But again, it is still a free website and will remain so. So let's talk about how you're going to discover what's available on FindAGrave. 116 million tombstone photos and memorials that have been created. How do you navigate that? Well, the first thing you need to know is that some of them are hinted on Ancestry.com. Hints only happen, of course, when there's a reasonable certainty that the record we're looking at is for the same person listed in your tree. So if you only have minimal information, there's more likelihood of error. The more information you have, the more accurate those hints become. Now, let's just take a look at what that means for those of you who aren't familiar with Ancestry.com hints. Here is my tree. Anytime there is a leaf, it means that I've got hints in my tree. So if I hover over this great-great-grandfather of mine, you'll see I have 7 Ancestry hints. I can click on that, and that's going to take me to the hint page for this great-grandfather. And you'll notice that one of those hints here is for the California FindAGrave record for his burial. Now, one of the things you need to understand about the FindAGrave records on Ancestry.com is that Ancestry.com, these records are all hosted on FindAGrave, meaning the records themselves are out on the FindAGrave website. Ancestry.com periodically does what we call a web crawl, where we go out and index the records available on that website and make them searchable and surfaceable through hints on Ancestry.com. Okay, so that means a couple of things. First of all, it means that you're going to see this title web at the beginning of the database name. That's one of the ways you know that you're looking at a web crawl database. It also means that you're going to have to leave Ancestry.com in order to go view that website. So when I click on this link to go look at the record itself, which I hope everybody does, you're viewing original records wherever they exist, it's going to open up or take me to the FindAGrave website. It's going to take me out of Ancestry.com. So here then are a couple of shots of the tombstone or the memorial plaque here for my great-grandfather and his last wife. There's also a photograph of the cemetery, the entrance to the cemetery, information about when and where he was born, who he was married to, who some of his children are, and of course the cemetery where he's buried. So that's what happens when you're looking at a record on Ancestry.com. Those records are still hosted on FindAGrave, and so it's going to take you out of Ancestry into FindAGrave. Now, those are the hints. When you see them in hints, that's what that means. You can also search the FindAGrave records on Ancestry.com. The easiest way to do that is to use the card catalog. Card catalog is the easiest way to start just about any search because you want to narrow it down to a specific database that you're looking for. So I'm going to come in here to the card catalog where we have 32,285 databases available on Ancestry.com. I'm going to type FindAGrave into the title field, And that's going to tell me that we have 53 databases available on Ancestry.com with the words FindAGrave in the title. You'll see here the way that Ancestry has broken them out for searchability is by state or by location. We do have an international database. I think we've got one for Canada. If I was to scroll down, I could probably find that. So we have one for all 50 states. I think we've got one for Canada, one for international. I'm not sure what, the other one might be Mexico. And so you can search for a specific location. So for example, if you know that your family is buried in New York and you only want to search New York records, you can do that by coming to the New York FindAGrave index. We try to give you parameters for what time period is covered by these particular tombstones, but there are a couple of things, just a couple little nuances here you need to be aware of. Remember how I mentioned that Ancestry.com crawls the web and indexes these records on FindAGrave, which means that when you're looking at these searchable records on Ancestry.com from FindAGrave, it's not a real-time search. We're not looking at the FindAGrave database and searching it. We're searching a cached or a web-crawled index of those entries. So these dates become really important. This says that tombstones from 1660 to 2012 are included in this New York database. There's 5 million of them, but when I hover over this title, I get a little pop-up card here, and the pop-up card gives me some additional information. The first piece of information it gives me is that this index was originally published on Ancestry.com in January of 2012, and that it was then updated in February of 2013. So February 2013 was the last time that Ancestry.com did a web crawl of the index for the state of New York on FindAGrave. What that means is that anybody who died after February of 2013 will not be included in this index. And this is the really important nuance that people sometimes miss, anyone whose tombstone photo or memorial was created after February of 2013 will also not be included in this index. So if this person died in 1860, but nobody took a photograph of their tombstone and uploaded it to FindAGrave until last summer, it's not going to be included here. Okay? And that's really important to understand so that you know what it is that you're searching and you know what you can expect to find. Now I can come in here and I can do any kind of a search on this particular database, and you'll see exactly what you saw on the leaf hint with one small exception. And I'm going to just point out this exception because, again, I think it's one of those little things that sometimes we miss. When I'm viewing this hint for my great-great-grandfather, and I want to attach this record as a source onto my tree, down here I'm just going to see this continue or ignore button. And when I click continue, it's going to walk me through what we call our merge process, where we merge this record or save this record to my tree. Okay. It just looks a little bit different when you do a search. Instead of the continue button, you have the save button, and then you can attach it to someone in your tree, and you then have to tell it who in your tree you want to attach that particular record to. So you have to locate the correct tree and then locate the correct person in your tree to attach that record. So that's just a little difference between searching, attaching searched records, and attaching hinted records. Okay, now you can, so you just want to make sure that you understand that it is not a real-time search on Ancestry.com and that you can hover over that entry in the card catalog to determine the last time it was crawled. Now, if you're not finding the record that you are looking for, you can search directly on FindAGrave. Okay, memorials are constantly being updated, added, and corrected. As a matter of fact, just this weekend, it was Memorial Day here in the United States, and so a lot of people spent a lot of time at cemeteries this weekend, and there was a little bit of a campaign or a push to get more memorials uploaded or updated on FindAGrave, and so we've got tens of thousands more than we did just a few days ago. And I imagine that as people download cameras and start to upload those memorials over the next couple of weeks, that we'll see even more. We always see an upswing in those tombstone photos being added, of course, in the summertime when people are out and about and visiting cemeteries more frequently than they do in the dead of winter. So you're going to search directly on FindAGrave, and here's how you do that. I'm going to come to FindAGrave.com. And you're going to see a little link here that says search 116 million grave records. Click that and it will take you just to this basic search form. And so I can then plug in the name of the person that I'm searching for and click search. Now there's 48 people with that last name. If I want to refine that search, I can do that by coming back here and saying, well, I know I think she's buried in Louisiana, and there's the record for her. So this then is my great-great-grandmother, and there's a photo of the location where she's buried. There's actually no plaque on the front of the burial site. And then there's this lovely photo of the cemetery entrance, or the archway to the cemetery. Links then back to her ex-husband's tombstone and to her son's tombstone in the Presidio in San Francisco. So there's some links here, there's some information, but you can search directly in FindAGrave. Now, one of the searches that they allow you to do is by maiden name. So in this case, this particular grandmother, let me make this a little bigger for you. This particular grandmother is indexed by both her married name and her maiden name. Not everyone is, but sometimes you can search both ways. Just make sure that you check this box, include maiden name in my searches. And when you do that, again, then it will bring up that particular record. You can also search by cemetery. So for example, if I come here and I go to my great-grandfather, I can search by cemetery by just clicking the name of the cemetery and then typing in a last name. So I can see who are all the people with this same last name who are buried in this same cemetery. Chances are there's some connection or relationship there, and this will help you discover or uncover some of that. So lots of different ways you can search directly on FindAGrave. You can search by using the search box. Make sure you try out the maiden name feature. You can also do partial searches on surnames. So for example, my last name sometimes is spelled C-O-W-A-N, sometimes it's spelled C-O-W-E-N. I could just type in that first part of my last name, do a partial search on that, and it would bring up all of the variants of that, particularly if I'm narrowing it down to a specific state or even a county if I happen to know where that county is. Okay, so it'll catch all those spelling variations if you use this partial search, partial name search. Now you can add birth and death years. One of the things that I've learned, and this is true no matter where I'm searching, if I'm searching on Ancestry.com, if I'm searching on doing a Google or Yahoo or Bing search, one of the things I've noticed is that I start with as little information as possible and then add information to narrow my search results, okay? Because very often, if I did it the other way, if I just filled in every single box with every piece of information I knew, I run the risk of A, getting no search results, or B, getting a search result and making the assumption that it's the right person in place just because it matches what my preconceived notions are about this person. So very often I will do these broad searches first. This returned 928 search results. Then I'm going to narrow that down by a specific location, name and location, of course being the two pieces of information that I use the most. Now I've only got 34 matches. I can quickly skim through this list without adding any additional search parameters to see if any of these men are born or died in about the time period I would expect, or if they were buried in about the location that I would expect them to be buried in. So really useful too, and then when I find the record I'm looking for, really useful to start with the least amount of information in your search result, in your search engine, and then add information to narrow those results as you see how many they return. Okay, so that's how you search directly on FindAGrave. You then have the option to attach it to your tree. I mentioned earlier that if it is a hint On Ancestry.com, you can use that continue button to walk through that merge process to attach that as a source citation to your tree. Or if you've done an Ancestry.com search, you can use the big orange save button to attach it as a source to your tree. It gets a little bit trickier when you find the record on FindAGrave. If you find it on FindAGrave, the easiest way to attach it to your tree is to use the web links feature. So let me just show you what that is here. If I'm in my tree on Ancestry.com and I have found a record that I want to attach to a person in my tree on some other website, if you scroll all the way down on this person page, you're going to see a section here entitled Web Links. And I can then add a link. And in this case, this link maybe is going to be for his FindAGrave entry. So if I come here, what I'm going to do, and this is what we mean when we say copy and paste the URL. The URL is this toolbar up here, this address bar up here. I'm going to just highlight everything in that address bar, and then I'm going to right-click and copy that link. And then when I come back over here to this page, right here in this field, I can right-click and paste, and it puts that link right in here. And then I can give that link a name. So I could say Park Werder Cowan FindAGrave page, and click Save. And now what I've done is I've created a link on this person profile page for this great-grandfather directly out to the FindAGrave page. When I click on it, it opens it right up, takes me right there. So I've linked the page to the FindAGrave page to the profile page. That's going to be the best way to do that, okay? Now, you're going to notice there are these photos here on FindAGrave, and I'm just going to offer a word of caution about the photos. One of the things that you may or may not be aware of is that photos, when they are taken, according to current U.S. copyright law, are copyrighted, automatically copyrighted by the photographer, which means you cannot take this image and use it in any way that you want to without the permission of the photographer. Underneath every one of these photos on FindAGrave, there's a little link to a profile page for that particular person who took that particular photo. So I would encourage you to just click that link and read the person's profile. Very often, you're going to see very generous FindAGrave contributors who have disclaimers right on their profile page that say that you are free to use this photo in any way that you choose to do so. And that's fantastic. Then you are free to add it to your tree. You can copy it to your computer. You can print it in a family chart. You can do whatever you want with it. Okay? But check their profile first to see if they've given that kind of a copyright release. If they haven't, most of them have contact information. So you just send them a quick email that just says, I noticed that you didn't have a copyright release on your page. I just wanted to know if I could copy this tombstone photo of my great-great-grandfather and use it in my family history. Send them a quick email requesting that permission before you copy that particular photo. So just only copy photos with permission. Now, there is one last little thing that I just want to share with you. One of the things that happens with some of these cemeteries, sometimes people go, the volunteers and the contributors that are participating in FindAGrave, they go out and they'll inventory or photograph an entire cemetery at a time. But sometimes they only do it on request, which means somebody has said, I know my family is buried in this particular cemetery. Could you please go take a photo of this tombstone? And so some cemeteries have been completely inventoried and photographed, and some cemeteries have not. So when you click on the name of the cemetery on a memorial, or when you do a cemetery lookup, when you search to see if a particular cemetery has had anything photographed, there is information here that tells you exactly what's been photographed and what has not. So in this case, at this Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, 259,000 interments, or 259,000 people have been buried there, okay? And it is 36% photographed, which means the entire cemetery has not yet been photographed. So even though I may know that I have a family member buried there, it might not yet be, they might not yet have been photographed. Their tombstone might not have been photographed. One of the things that Ancestry.com has done, if you go to Ancestry.com/honor your ancestors, we've created a little bit of a Memorial Day, what we call a Memorial Day landing page. And if you scroll down, there's this really cool map that I'm kind of digging on right now. And it's called How is Your State Doing? And it is a graphical representation of how complete or incomplete, in many cases, the tombstone photography, the gravestone photographing is going. And so you can see it's color-coded here. If you just use the little legend underneath the map, you can see that some states, the green ones in particular, are between 75 and 100% photographed, which means the identified cemeteries in those states, they have been photographed at that rate. Some states, if you look at the orange ones, for example, are less than 50% photographed, and so there's more help that's needed in those locations. And I mentioned that in our next show on Thursday, we'll be talking a little bit more about how you can contribute to FindAGrave. But as a consumer, as a user of FindAGrave, it's really helpful to just be able to see, you know what, I know I have family buried in Illinois, and it looks like, only about 40%, between 40 and 25% of the cemeteries, the identified cemeteries have been completely photographed. And so that's a really important distinction to know that if I'm looking for family there, I might not find them on FindAGrave, so I might have to make a request or do some additional research to see if I can figure out where they're buried so that I can make a request for someone who lives locally there to go photograph that. Or maybe even I want to put it on my travel itinerary for my summer vacation so that I can go and photograph it myself. So again, if you just go to Ancestry.com/honor your ancestors, you'll be able to find the landing page for our Memorial Day campaign. And if you scroll down, you'll find that map to get an idea, just a general idea of how complete the photographing of the gravestones is in the identified cemeteries in that particular state. So hopefully this was a good introduction to FindAGrave for those of you who've never used it before. Again, 116 million tombstones and memorials have been created on their website. And sometimes it's the only place that you're going to find information about some of the people in your tree, particularly when you talk about families who lost children in between census years. There's no census record. There might not be a birth or death record. There may just be a little tombstone that exists somewhere in some little cemetery in the middle of nowhere that some gracious volunteer has gone and cleared and photographed and uploaded that photo so that there is a memorial to that person where no other record may exist. I just want to say, in the shadow of this Memorial Day, how grateful I am, not just for all of those who fought and died for our freedoms, which is the purpose of Memorial Day, but also for all of you who make the effort and take the time to go out and to catalog these cemeteries, to take these photographs, to upload them, to maintain these memorials, so that we have access to this historical information about our ancestors in a way that we might never, ever be able to access them in any other way. So thank you to all of you who contribute, and as a user of FindAGrave, I am really grateful for the time and effort that you put in, and thank you for making this available to all of us. Hopefully this has been informational for the rest of you who are trying to use FindAGrave, some of the search tips and tricks and hints that have allowed me to find hundreds, maybe even thousands of FindAGrave memorials that pertain to my family. Hopefully you'll have the same success. If you're watching this show at our regularly scheduled time, I will be on chat in just a few minutes to answer any additional questions you may have about FindAGrave. And again, next Thursday, in just 2 days, we'll be talking about the FindAGrave mobile app and some ways in which you can participate as a contributor to FindAGrave. Until next time, this is Krista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.